Your friend downloads a playground photo at 1:17 a.m. The file stutters, pixels smear. In the far corner, a tall, faceless figure leans past the slide, casual, like it belongs there. The cursor hovers on save. Click. The hard drive groans. A folder refuses to open. That whisper. It isn't in the room. It rides the speakers like breath on glass. You're in the Midnight Archive. We peel stories beyond the veil, carefully, like old wallpaper, one brittle layer at a time. This isn't just a meme. It's an idea that behaves like contagion. To hear the whisper, we go back to a single thread that wasn't meant to matter. Let's dive deeper. A humour forum ran a Photoshop challenge. Make the ordinary uncanny. No grand claims, just craft and mischief. The canvas was everyday life. Playgrounds, group photos, school trips, places where our guard rests. Into that safe daylight, one entry dropped like a thorn. Children clustered in front. In the background, a stretched silhouette in a dark suit stood too still, too tall. No face, not centered, just present. The caption read like a case note. A clipped school name, a plausible date, a location that felt familiar and nameless at once. Authority without a source. That tone mattered. Another image followed, a washed, decades-old fire brigade shot, half bleached and weary. On the edge, the same presence, blurred, distant, watching. The text pretended to be archival, recovered from redacted, photographer missing. It sounded official because we trust the sound of official. The thread laughed at first, but the laughter thinned. Jokes lost oxygen when the captions started to feel like paperwork. The game's rules shifted under the floorboards. Captions became little engines of law. Scene near the woods, last recorded at dusk. Children report dreams. A fake stamp date at the corner did heavy lifting. It's strange, but our minds respect stamps more than stories. The scaffolding looked like a file, so we treated it like a file. Peel back that wallpaper, and older patterns show through. The tall stranger at the tree line, the watcher with a blank where a face should be. The silhouette was new, the outline in us wasn't. Meanwhile, role-play investigators joined the thread. They wrote like clerks. They cited ledger excerpts with numbers that referenced nothing. Someone claimed a relative saw a similar figure years earlier. No names, no towns, only contours, enough for apophenia to grip. We connected dots designed to be connectable. The forum stopped being a contest and turned into a lab for dread. Design choices crystallized. The suit wasn't decoration. It implied intention. Less animal, more appointment. The blank face was collaborative, a mirror waiting for your fear. Height did simple math. Scale equals authority. Most of all, distance did the work. He wasn't the subject. He was punctuation. A hard stop at the edge of the frame, telling you the sentence belonged to him. Then the temperature changed. Users started adding incident numbers, tags, and photos with redacted school names. The black bars implying risk. Where there's a censor box, there must be a dangerous truth. A joke stitched to fake documentation began to pass for a record. Screenshots slipped off the forum and into the wild. Stripped of context, the images travelled as found artifacts. Outside the thread, irony dies first. Stakes crept in. Pixels pretending to be paper became paperwork in the mind. People began reading ordinary glitches, motion blur, sensor noise, compression shiver, as signs. The thread turned into rehearsal. Tiny omissions did big work. A clipped name, a smeared date, a stamp that looked almost right. We learned to fear the frame before we saw the thing in it. What nobody knew then, the most contagious element wasn't the figure. It was the paperwork style, the dates, the clipped names, the redactions, the faux catalogue numbers. The thread built the feeling of an archive, and reality bends toward archives. Once a filing cabinet appears, we assume there's a room. Once there's a room, we assume a keeper. And once there's a keeper, the story doesn't have to be true. It only has to be well formatted. That was the moment everything changed. The contest entries weren't entries anymore. They were exhibits. The figure stayed quiet at the edge of the frame, and the captions did the talking. In that hush, fear learned a new grammar. While the thread warmed, a second current formed outside it. Artists began carrying the silhouette into alleys, tree lines, apartment corridors with failing fluorescence. The choices stayed ruthless. Too tall, too still. A suit as neutral as a funeral program. Tendrils appeared as emphasis, not gore. Thin lines suggesting reach without showing harm. The iconography was modular. Anyone could add a fragment and keep the shape intact. Fan art slid into rehearsal for sightings. A charcoal smear behind a swing set. A photocopy with the features stripped away. Static used like paint. Technique mattered less than ingredients. Low resolution did favors. Grain forgave seams. Compression hid edits the way fog hides distance. The figure lived in those gaps between pixels, where your mind does the finishing work. Then came rabbit holes. People posted field notes, hospital intake forms, letterheads that looked official at arm's length. A geotag here, a map pin there, each one close enough to visit if you cut a corner on trespassing. Blogs linked to cryptic videos that linked to locked posts. It felt like an ARG without a prize. The point wasn't to win. The point was to keep searching. Viewers became participants. If you found a symbol on a telephone pole, you photographed it. If your phone hiccuped near the woods, you posted the waveform and called it an EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, the kind ghost hunters swear rides inside static. Fieldwork and fiction began to share a desk. Marble hornets knocked quietly. Fragments of a student project gone wrong. Tapes catalogued with bare labels. The cadence trained us to read interference like weather. Static wasn't an error, it was an omen. When the figure did show, it wasn't the star, it was punctuation. An abrupt interruption that made the camera stumble. The air thickened. Cuts landed early. We learned to rewind, frame step, argue over shadows that might have been branches. The series taught a literacy for noise, meaning hid in artifacts. The absence inside the suit did the rest. Parallel to this, wikis began to codify. Lists crystallized. Proximity sickness, memory gaps, the compulsion to record, the woods as threshold. A circle and X scratched where it shouldn't be. Contradictions didn't fracture the canon. They textured it. One page blamed light for interference, another blamed water, and both felt admissible because dread outranks doctrine. Communities drafted best practices. Don't speak the name. Don't look at the face. Don't follow into the trees. Rules create an outline of safety, and outlines invite tests. Why did this work so well? Replication was cheap. You didn't need budgets or prosthetics. You needed distance, stillness, restraint. You could find him in your own hallway by killing the lights and letting your phone struggle. Pattern seeking did the labor. We're wired to detect agency in almost noise. A glitch isn't random when a story can claim it. A shadow isn't a coat rack when fear wants it to move. Micro-stories multiplied. A teenager editing at 2:14 a.m. sees a duplicated frame and swears it blinked. A creator adds a half-second of static to sell a cut, then hears that same frequency in the house hum and can't sleep. People frighten themselves with their craft. The feedback loop tightened. The more convincing the artifact, the more the maker believed for a night. Stakes rose quietly. This wasn't a studio pipeline. It was an idea you could manufacture at home, with your friends, with your city's grey corners as a set. Viral production bred viral belief. A timeline formed from uploads and edits. Behaviours accrued. How close he stands, how electronics fail, how trees crowd when he's near. Evidence arrived not through proof, but through practice. The unsettling truth held. Act as if long enough, and it gains weight. But there was one problem. A story that grows needs rules, or it diffuses. Therefore, the crowd started writing them down, carving symbols, staging rituals, and treating every new artifact like a shard of an archive still being assembled. Moving deeper into this case, the crowd began carving the story into stone. Trait lists multiplied, height indeterminate, face featureless, suit dark, arms too long, interference likely, tree line favoured. New arrivals copied from old threads, sometimes word for word, sometimes with a sliver of drift that felt like regional folklore. Contradictions didn't weaken the shape, they fogged it. And fog carries sound farther than clear air. Rituals followed because fear likes procedure. Pages torn from notebooks. The operator symbol gouged into bark. Notes tucked into coat pockets before a night walk, like talismans you could abandon if needed. The language tightened until it felt like a catechism. Don't look. Don't follow. Leave offerings. Stand still if the static rises. A lexicon makes the unreal navigable, and navigable things feel near. Reciting rules out loud draws a boundary you can press with a fingertip. Meanwhile, the archive illusion grew teeth. Users posted scans of municipal ledgers, browned at the edges, listing property valuations beside cryptic notations. Others uploaded fake clippings, serif columns with crooked staples, a report of a missing child married to an advertisement for a store that no longer exists. The surfaces were persuasive, stamps with imperfect ink, redactions that weren't perfectly straight, as if a human hand had decided what we couldn't know. We were peeling back old wallpaper again. Except this time the older layer was printed last week and carefully creased to look tired. Why did these artifacts persuade? Because they wore the bureaucratic chill we've learned to trust. Redactions imply risk. Catalogue numbers imply custody. The evidence suggests our brains treat formatting as a promise. If it looks like a file, we assume a file room. If there's a room, there must be a keeper. The unsettling truth is that provenance can be faked faster than trust can be rebuilt. And once the cabinet appears, reality leans toward it. One detail kept returning like a tick in the margin. The suit. It wasn't flair, it was intent, less beast than appointment. That single choice shifted the emotional math. This wasn't the forest's appetite. It was a meeting you didn't schedule. Which is worse, teeth you can see, or a blank that reflects you back? The blank face collaborated with the viewer. It borrowed whatever fear you brought, then stood very still. But there was one problem. The more rules people wrote, the safer they felt. Therefore, the game escalated offline. Small groups drafted checklists for hunts. Say the name 3 times, draw the symbol, walk into the tree line for 30 seconds, record your pulse, report any signal drop. Ritual didn't just simulate fear, it produced it. Elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, a hum that was always in the room but now had meaning. Interference felt present because the body had already decided. Skeptics joined the circle, cataloguing fonts and paper textures, showing how ledger scans were layered, tracing a clipping's lineage through image compression scars. Believers catalogued anomalies, a GPS jump, a hiss buried in an audio flaw, a face that should have been there and wasn't. The debate itself oxygenated the myth. Each rebuttal was another citation. Each debunk migrated, re-uploaded, reinterpreted as a clue the skeptic missed. The archive thickened, whether you fought it or fed it. Patterns hardened into etiquette. Tag sightings, blur children's faces, credit sources, don't break the chain. Communities enforce tone the way folklore does, with memory and mild punishment. Elders emerged, users who remembered how it used to be, and apprentices learned the grammar of dread. It edged from content into custom. Something else took root, density over purity. A single flawless artifact could be dismissed. A junk drawer pile of almost convincing scraps felt heavy. Like layers of paint on a door, each coat added weight and hid the grain. It remains a chilling possibility that quantity can impersonate truth when fear provides the binder. And under it all, documentation became the monster's shadow. Not screams, not blood, dates, case numbers, redactions. The paper trail we manufactured was the presence we obeyed. We didn't just record the myth, we trained ourselves to live by its forms. While the archive illusion thickened online, the outside world finally turned its head. Headlines arrived like sirens, loud, flattened, hungry for a single cause. The name jumped from thread shorthand to morning shows. Context fell away. A collage of edits and whispers was treated like a singular threat, packaged for fear. The story escaped the lab and went looking for oxygen. The unsettling truth is, ideas can compel behavior. Not often, but enough to matter. When they surface in fragile minds, the damage can be real. Investigations scoured search histories for patterns, trying to turn curiosity into motive. Comment sections swelled with blame. The internet was framed as an unguarded forest where anything could wait between the trees. Guides appeared overnight, translating forum in-jokes into warning labels that missed the tone and missed the craft. Creators felt the floor tilt. Some pinned disclaimers to the top of playlists. Fiction, context, origin. Others pulled uploads or added behind-the-scenes posts that showed masks, edits, and timelines, trying to put the genie back in the green room. Platforms adjusted, moderation hardened. Age gates, advisories, and removals rolled out fast. Clips vanished, mirrored within hours. The archive grew Hydra heads. Cut one, and 2 more wore the same suit. We have to ask where the ethical line sits when folklore leaks. Who carries responsibility when a narrative built for collaborative make-believe brushes real harm, or the fear of it? Originators who started the game, remixers who sharpened the grammar, platforms whose recommendation loops stitched the trail. Responsibility scattered like confetti. It felt everywhere and nowhere. That ambiguity became its own anxiety. History offered a dim lantern. Broadcast fear had jumped rails before. Rumour had worn official clothes and marched people to bad places. The difference now was speed and documentation. What nobody foresaw in those first posts was the strongest vector: plausibility through paperwork. Dates, captions, redactions, the bureaucratic chill we trust. That veneer travelled better than any jump scare. It looked safe enough to share and serious enough to fear. Inside homes, the human angle was quieter and heavier. Parents scrolled through histories and felt outmatched. Teachers fielded questions from teens already 3 layers deeper than any pamphlet. Counselors built impromptu lexicons: interference, operator symbol, proximity sickness. Meanwhile, some teenagers leaned into the liminal thrill: night walks, whispered dares, a symbol scrawled in a margin like a private handshake with the unknown. Fear turned into posture: eyes on the tree line, phones up, recording, just in case. Institutions absorbed the impact. The figure became shorthand for media literacy lessons, a case study in conferences about digital folklore and moral panic. Moderation teams wrote playbooks: contextualize early, intervene without amplifying, preserve evidence without mythologizing it. Panels debated participatory horror and platform duty under fluorescent light. The myth that began as a workshop of dread now stood on stages and defended its syllabus. If that wasn't strange enough, scrutiny didn't dissolve it. It molted and returned. Coverage pushed it into new skins: indie films, games, cleaner series that stripped lore and sharpened cadence. Each reboot promised clarity and handed newcomers a starter kit. Debunk threads became recipes. A teardown of interference taught a generation how to counterfeit the symptom. Therefore, curiosity renewed. Jokes gave distance. Distance enabled safe retelling. Retellings refreshed the archive. Ethically, better creators learned to thread needles. They foregrounded process, showing the seam to defuse the spell. They added resource links, safety notes, and community rules. No glorification, no targeting. Protect minors, credit sources, respect boundaries. They treated the audience like collaborators in a safe illusion. Others farmed fear for clicks and left their communities to mop the spill. The thing is, responsibility isn't a single lever. It's a mesh: personal restraint, platform design, community norms, and education that teaches the difference between a file's tone and its truth. We must consider how easily a story can borrow official clothes and walk past the guard. When we react only after the sirens, we abandon the quiet hours when format and framing do their work. In the aftermath, one lesson held: context must travel with content. The archive illusion feeds on isolation: an image severed from its maker, a caption cut from its origin. Reattaching provenance shrinks the room where dread masquerades as documentation. And yet, ambiguity remains the hook. We still lean toward the static, waiting for a voice that often turns out to be our own. And yet the silhouette kept moving. Reboots arrived like tide. Games about endurance, films that swapped lore but preserved the outline, series that trimmed cadence until only interruption remained. The essentials tightened: distance, stillness, a suit so neutral it felt like absence wearing clothes. Tendrils came and went, a gesture more than anatomy. The tree line stayed a corridor you sensed before you saw. Memes tried to declaw it. Irony put on oven mitts and touched the heat. Jokes captioned the outline, flattened the dread, then quietly saved the image anyway. That smirk acted like insulation, but the figure slid beneath it. Fear found the seam and waited in the scroll. Persistence had simple mechanics: ambiguity plus participation. Many authors, a thin canon. The rules were soft clay. You could press a thumb and not crack the statue. The archetype survived because it was mostly negative space, an absence you learned to read. Like peeling back old wallpaper, every new layer revealed the same glue holding. A technical current helped. The silhouette lived where compression thrives: dark frames, low bit rates, handheld stutter. Night modes promised clarity and delivered artifacts. Noise reduction smeared edges until shadows looked deliberate. Motion smoothing made slow turns uncanny. Modern media inadvertently generated the weather he prefers. Debunks fueled the engine. A thread proving a ledger fake linked the high-resolution scan. A breakdown of interference taught viewers how to mimic the symptom. Tutorials meant as antidotes became starter kits. Skepticism offered recipes. Curiosity cooked. Therefore, the archive refilled itself. Communities adapted their etiquette into exportable kits: symbol packs, shader presets, static beds you could drop under dialogue. The grammar of dread became drag and drop. Portability kept the myth multilingual, translated across platforms without losing cadence. Stakes evolved from belief to vocabulary. For a cohort, static now means presence, not error. Interference is a mood, not a malfunction. The operator symbol communicates without caption. The lexicon outlived the first photos and migrated into classrooms, chats, and low-budget sets. That's cultural persistence, not just fandom. He also molts by context. Some creators trade woods for glass towers. Elevators become vertical forests. Daylight intrusions test the contour. A shadow with no sun. A reflection that erases rather than mirrors. Others strip tendrils, then restore them as an accent. Each revision protects the core, an interruption that behaves like punctuation. He arrives. The air thickens. The cut lands early. The projects that endure share restraint. They leave negative space for the mind to finish the outline. Overexposure breaks the spell. The face painted in full dissolves the fear. The blank remains durable because it borrows the eye that looks. That isn't just horror craft, it's folklore tuned to a feedback loop. We carry the cadence, and the cadence carries him. What nobody planned, but everyone learned, is that the myth's durability comes from our maintenance habits. We tag, we credit, we replicate parameters, we pass along best practices. We behave like an archive staff, and so the archive never closes. In that constant care, the outline keeps standing at the edge of the frame, saying nothing, waiting for us to finish the sentence. So, back to the second-hand account. Your friend can't sleep. Every file hiccup feels intentional. The whisper returns whenever the speaker's idle. Conflict settles in the wiring, not the figure, but the idea that the house has started listening. They stop editing after dark. They unplug, then plug back in, then watch the cursor tremble like a pulse. We retrace the first thread with colder eyes, pull the earliest posts, match timestamps against archive snapshots, note the fonts that didn't exist when a scan claims it was printed. Screenshots of screenshots carry compression scars like tree rings. The seams show, and yet the dread ignores them. That's the bind. The paperwork's tone outruns its proof. We change tactics, treat it like living folklore, map the rituals, list the phrases that harden fear into procedure. Don't look, don't follow, leave notes. We realize the documentation is a teacher. It instructs you what to feel before the feeling arrives. When the speakers hiss, you're already trained to call it presence. The comeback starts with the room, not the myth. Router off, Bluetooth killed, external drive unplugged. The hiss drifts back into the ordinary hum it always was. We test for interference with a different power strip. Files open after a cold boot, nothing cinematic, just control returning in quiet increments. Relief arrives, too large for the fixes that produced it. Boundaries follow. Headphones off after midnight. No symbols taped as a joke. Daylight edits only. We replace ritual with routine, which is its own kind of spell. The house stops feeling like an accomplice. A diagram becomes the reveal. Power wasn't in the monster, it was in metadata and the human urge to complete patterns. Captions behaved like case files, so the mind supplied a case. Static signaled presence, so the room's noise acquired a shape. We built a corridor and stepped into it to see if it would answer. Your friend deletes the folder. The whisper stops, or more precisely, the label is removed, so the sound goes back to being a sound. Ambiguity remains, because this is how such stories breathe. A streetlight across the window flickers. They watch it, then watch themselves watching it. The blinds close. That small refusal is the resolution. Meaning doesn't arrive with a jump. It lands like a working rule. The myth lives where attention and artifact meet. The forest is our screen. If we dress every glitch in a suit, the corridor appears. If we let noise be noise, the hallway stays a hallway. We'll still hear static. The difference now is who we decide is holding the dial. This wasn't a haunting. It was compliance, pure digital obedience. We obeyed a forum dressed as evidence, mistook paperwork for presence, and walked a corridor built from our own cacophonous hubris. If you're still here, you're part of the archive now. Thank you dearly for your support, as none of this would be possible without you, the listener. Subscribe and open the next case file. Tell us in the comments which device, date stamp, redaction, or static, hooked you first, and why it worked on you. Ready to see how documentation becomes a doorway in another legend? Tap the next story, The Midnight Archives. The last case is always yours.